Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talk to Rami show. I'm so happy to be here in different studio. I'm actually not in my studio. I'm in different studio. They call it Soundshed Studio, created by Matthew Alvarez and his team. I can't tell you enough how beautiful this studio is, and I'm welcome here today to have a chat, with the creator of this phenomenal work. And we're going to talk about his story, how he made it from the zero to hero. He's not only the hardcore entrepreneur, but he's the man of giving and the hard and nice, everything. We're going to talk about Matthew and know his story because his story is very fascinating, guy. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that I didn't know about, you don't know about, but you're going to know about it very soon. Matthew, welcome to the show, my friend.
Rami, dude, we just met. I feel like we're brothers now, right? It was
But
crazy.
thank you so much for having me in your studio.
Absolutely, man.
Really, this is like amazing. What you have created in the Soundshed studio is amazing. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Matthew, this quiet guy that I met? And everybody think that you are introvert, but you are full of experience and stories. And the little chat we had the other day at my place, actually, I was very fascinated by the story. How you create all this with perseverance and the dream and the hard work and everything else. Tell me and our audience that, how did you start?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's an interesting story. It's kind of one of those. We've always considered ourselves kind of the underdog story, um, and I think what's interesting about everything we've done this far is it kind of just spurs from a lot of things that I've learned, not just from life experience, but from individuals like you. As I launched this company and started working more and more with entrepreneurs and creators and all sorts of people who have built these amazing things, whether it's a company or construction or just audiovisual, like it all has the same root foundation in being somebody who can conceptualize something and then just deliver it to fruition. And that was always something that I think I've done my entire life in different smaller avenues. And yeah, so when this opportunity presented itself, I was like, oh, I've got to go all in, and the story is a lot deeper than that in terms of, my turmoil and my journey and the things that I had to go through to get to this point and the team that we've built and the individuals that I've worked with. But kind of just backing up, I mean, your main question is, who am I? And I think that's kind of ingrained in everybody. We are always going to be creators, regardless of whether or not we accept that or we pursue that or we decide, hey, we're gonna take this to the next level and make it a business. And I think it's just having the opportunity to realize that earlier on and being able to say, this is what I want to do, and then having the right opportunity with the individuals that we've been working with. It all just kind of made sense. So everything I've pursued is really based on just self-challenge, personal challenge, liking to create, liking to work in a team is always the best thing for me, because I can't thrive unless I have really good people to work with and people to feed off of and people to learn from. You're always learning. So that's really what I feel like at my core excites me to do things like this. So.
But I remember when we were talking, you said that you were using, you were working at the WeWork and you're audio video engineering and all that stuff. And then you decided, I want to go all in my own thing. And how did you do that shift? Because it's scary, really, being an entrepreneur and taking that kind of risk. And it's very scary and sometimes can be very lonely. And you might fail. We all fail. And
Right.
I'm sure you failed many times. I have failed many times. But how did you make that shift, like mentally, that I want to leave all that stuff. I'm engineering now, that I want to go to creative and create like a studio, environment and the podcast studio and all that stuff. How did you make that shift?
The shift was definitely a leap of faith. I don't think I was really prepared for it. It was one of those things where when I started the company, I didn't really have a line of sight to what my goals were, and it was really just all encompassing for necessity. You know, COVID definitely affected us in a way that we had to decide: do I find another job? Or do I use the skill sets that I've gained up until now to create something where I can feel a little bit more secure? And it's kind of it's kind of funny because you think about security as like, okay, if I go get a job and I work
Yes.
this place and I kind of grandfather myself into this process and these people, I'll have that security because then I'll have my 401k and I'll have my retirement. And that is kind of a way we're all conditioned to pursue our careers in our life. It's like you kind of decide what you want to do, but then you lose a little bit of that personal growth in doing so because you're kind of stuck in that one thing. You don't challenge yourself. And so I made that decision after WeWork had the whole round of layoffs. There wasn't a lot going on. It was an employer's market at that point, and anybody who had enough stakeholders and enough capital to continue to be a company at that time, they were trying to retain their best talent, and everything else they were supplementing with the lowest wages or to the lowest bidder. And so for us, I remember at that point in time, I was only getting offers for engineering roles at like $14-15 an hour as an engineer. And I thought that was ridiculous. And then there were also opportunities to be like an installer or a technician and things like that. And I was just like, at this point in my career, at my age, I was 32, and I couldn't see myself going back to that, and I didn't want to go back to working for somebody where they didn't necessarily have the work culture that I had found at WeWork. So the only other option was do my own thing, see if I can create that. But to your point, it was like super scary. It was extremely scary. And I would liken it to how people talk about kids, right? We don't have kids, but everybody says you don't know until
Yeah.
you do it. You're gonna fall on your face, you're gonna
Until you
make
get into it.
absolutely. Yeah, you're gonna make mistakes and you're not gonna know, what the hell you're doing, but it becomes your baby, right? And from there, the more time you put into it, the more you see the results and you see the returns. And that was something that fascinated me because I spent my whole life and my whole career creating for somebody else or creating for the affirmation of other people, right? So playing music or recording or being an audio engineer, everything else was literally giving back to somebody else's baby, right? So somebody comes to me and they say, hey, I want to record an album, or I want to do this or that, or I want to do a music video or a commercial video, something like that. It all became, you know, a goal more entwined in giving them what they were looking for. So you lose some of that creative control, which is fine, but I wanted to get into something that could be fruitful enough for me to say, hey, we can grow, we can scale, and be a lot more comfortable than a volatile job in a market during COVID, you know?
But you always had this back of your mind because the story that we talk about, you were collecting the phones. That was so interesting for me that I want you to tell that story for the listener and the viewers because that was very interesting. Behind back of your mind, you knew one day you had that thirst, that things for just creating things, and you were
Right.
collecting the phones to acoustic and this soundproofing. You knew that kinda you want to go that way. Is that right?
Yes. So I think what's funny about that story when we were talking at lunch the other day, I was thinking about it, and I think it felt like have you ever watched Hoarders?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Like it felt like an episode of Hoarders, right? Like I was working in the medical field, and I was collecting the packing foam, that packing foam
Yeah.
we talked about from the pharmaceutical drugs. And it's what they call open cell polyurethane foam. It's that super squishy stuff. You feel it in chairs, you
Yeah.
feel it in different use cases. And I just kept collecting it, had it in a little storage unit. And over time, I was trying to decide, what I wanted to do. At the time, I stopped playing music for a little bit. I was tired of, being on the road and playing in bands and being on tour. And again, that inherent nature to create just kept bugging me and bugging me. And it was harder and harder because I was in an environment where I didn't like my job. I was tired of dealing with band members, like I needed to challenge myself. And it was so weird that it would come in the form of this foam to kind of spur that idea. And I called a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, let's build a studio." I'm 21, I think, at the time.
Wow.
And yeah, it was funny because I asked him, I was like, "Hey, do you want to build a studio?" Neither one of us were audio engineers. We had never recorded. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. We didn't know how to hold a power drill at the time. And so we were in this storage unit where we were storing all this stuff. And we just started doing it. We brought in two other friends, and we just kind of figured it out as we went. And it really helped to have them there. When you're doing something on your own and you're creating on your own, it's a little bit harder to see beyond your nose, right? It's a little bit harder
Yes.
to get that outside input to be like, oh, I didn't look at it this way. Perspective changes when you have three other people. And so we kind of pushed through this thing, and over time I kind of took the reins like I typically do and spent a lot more time I would get off work at about 3 p.m. and then I would literally work on the studio till about 1 or 2 a.m. the next day, and then have to get back up at 6:30 to go back to work. And it meant so much to me to move on to this next stage of what I was doing. And so in my mind, I could see the results. I could see what I wanted to achieve. And I think what I tend to do is I really push the boundaries of pretty much anybody I'm surrounded with. And I think that kind of took a toll on some of the teammates. And that's one thing I learned over time. It's like playing with other people, like learning to play to other people's strengths and leveraging those things. And rather than being this all omnipotent, like leader, like, oh, I'm going to get this done. And if you can't, follow my pace, then, then you're a weak link. I learned that over time because it did start to become more lonely as I spent more and more time doing it myself, and less time spending it with the people I started with. And but yeah, we got there though, and we finished it up, and we started getting bookings, and here I am, like 22 when we finally finished it. And I think it only took us about 4 or 5 months. But what do we do next? Like, what the hell are we gonna do?
Basically, you build a prototype.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we built out the space, but it was a matter of now I need the skill set to use the space. So
Okay.
I gained some, the skills in, like, building and learning how to frame and all that stuff. And it wasn't perfect.
Because everything that I see here, from the lighting, from the mic, from the ceiling, all of them are customized.
Right.
Like everything here is customized. Like, you can do the same thing for the clients and just go over there, turnkey podcast, audio, video studio, and just turn it into this beautiful space. But when you started it, you start with some people, and they said, "Hey, Matthew, we're going to work with you," and everything else. And some people, they fall out, as
Right.
you know that.
Right.
How did you deal with that? Because you want to keep going and you need this help. Because the reason I ask you, a lot of startups, they started with their co-founder, they started with the people they work around them. And then after a while, they're not believing their mission, their vision, and they're going to fall off. But you got to get going. You got to go. How did you deal with that scarcity of, like, helper, and then just still keep going and create the momentum?
Well, I mean, the good thing was let's call this Soundshed 1.0. Right.
Yeah.
This was more of just a personal vision to have a space to be able to record. And, at the time I was avidly playing music still, and I wanted to still be involved in the music industry and working with people. So it didn't have the same impact as it would have had when I started this company. It was something that was supposed to be more of a passion project. And I think I would always treat it as though it was a business, but I had never really accepted that label of entrepreneur. And even now I still don't. I own a business, and I'm building this business, and to some people from the outside in, it's like, hey, you're an entrepreneur, you're doing your own thing.
Yes, you are. I'm gonna give you that news.
Sure, yeah. and I'll be open to anybody's interpretation of what I'm doing now. Back then I just saw it as, hey, this is a kind of a glorified hobby. And I remember my wife would drive me nuts about this, right? Because in treating it like that, I was so divided. It was this kind of dichotomy of, is this a business or is this a hobby?
Is it a hobby?
And I always treated it as a business when it was convenient, right? When I hated my job and I was like, oh my God, I need to do this studio thing, I need to go all in. It was that fear of going all in that made it a hobby, but it was the opportunity of being able to make money with it that was right there in front of my face that made it a business.
I'm sorry.
And so I never allowed myself to go all in when it was at that point, and it I think it could have been successful. I know it could have been, but I think that's what separates, when you draw that line in the sand and you cross over it and you say, hey, I can't turn back. I never did that in the beginning. So to answer your question, it was less impactful financially and accountability wise to just say, okay, I'm just going to do this when I feel like doing it. And part of that was a blessing and a curse because I learned a lot from it, from audiovisual and being an engineer and recording. And it took me 10 years to consider myself proficient in recording artists and things like that. And I'm still not the best of the best. You have to spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours really hyper focused on that one thing. But that was something that eventually my daytime career started to kind of take over again and kind of lost a little bit of interest. But once that was really just me doing it, I think that's what it was. It was really the creating the space, building the space. I think that I look back on now and I say, whoa, this is really cool to build something out of nothing, literally nothing, and then be able to use it and feel like, hey, I can create out of the space now. And when I sold it, it was right before the pandemic. And funnily enough, the guy reached back out to me probably about 3 weeks ago to buy some more studio equipment I had lying around. And he has just really taken the space and he's made it a full-time career because he saw the opportunity and he made the investment and he went all in. And that's what was different. For me, I didn't want it bad enough and he did. And now he's doing it full time. And I really commend him for that because yeah, man, take what I created and take it to the nth degree because that's what you're going to leverage it for. It just wasn't for me. So then throughout my career, it was just kind of working in different AV jobs. I worked in home automation, I worked in commercial AV system design and support at WeWork. I worked in education, I've worked in IT. And yeah, a lot of that was just a culmination of the skill sets that I was not necessarily super interested in. I had no path, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I just like to create things. And I like to create with people and I like to work on those teams, like I've said. And so,
when did you decide that, this is what I want to do? It's not a hobby anymore. It's going to be a career. And you talk to your wife. I have a wife, and I say, hey, honey, this is what I want to do. It's going to be hard. It's going to be dark. Financially, I'm going to go up and down. I don't know if I'm going to do it. When did you decide to do that? And how did you deal with the judgment? Because we all have circle of friends and their family. They're going to judge you no matter what. How did you deal with that? And you said, regardless of what you say, I'm going to go.
Yeah. So again, the pandemic pushed us into, there's
no other way.
It was simple. It was fight or flight. I didn't want to go back to, I wanted to kind of create my own structure. I was tired of jumping in and out of other places. And, WeWork set the bar pretty high. And no matter what people say about it and their perception of the movie and Adam and the IPO and all that stuff, it was one of those things where I had gained the skill sets that I really felt made me super proficient in my field. Never got necessarily the notoriety that other people felt I should have had with what I knew. And that was okay. I was fine with that. I was like, you know what? I like what I do. I enjoy what I do. I never planned on being an AV guy. But then working with WeWork, it kind of shifted my viewpoint on business. It shifted my viewpoint on culture because it was always people first. It was the work culture first. It was coming to a place where you felt that regardless of where you were in terms of proficiency, you were still put on a pedestal because you took the time to make that effort. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe, we want to see the best of the best in our companies. We want to have the best people and the people who can really outperform everybody else. But there's something to be said about cultivation and helping people find their best selves. And so going to WeWork, it was kind of like the Kool-Aid. I was like, oh my God, everybody here is just so happy.
I
And
get
like,
free
yeah,
drinks and all.
everybody's young and hot and like
Yeah.
free beer and kombucha, all this stuff. And that was really cool. It was definitely a culture shock for me. But what felt good was to be able to ease into a space where I was like, oh, these guys actually do appreciate my knowledge. They appreciate what I was doing. So after the layoffs, I had 4 months to decide, what I was going to do next. I did a little bit of contract work for a place. I won't name them, but it was going back into this like soul sucking environment where I felt that I was all the way up here
And then you went bam.
and they made me feel like, no, sorry, like this is what we're paying you and you're going to just stay down here and this is what we're going to make you like you're never going to outgrow this space. Like you're a contractor, this is what you do. We don't care about your opinion on anything else, and that's fine. And to some degree, everybody has a lane, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're building a company, everybody needs to kind of know this is the lane you stay in, yada yada. But there's a way to show that people have value in terms of just having those conversations and be like, hey, we really need mission critical stuff to be done right now. Let's have a meeting over happy hour and let's talk about some of these ideas. It wasn't like that at all. It was just like, do your shit, get out, and then we'll see you tomorrow. I think because I pushed back a bit on that and I was trying to innovate, they kind of were like, yeah, we'll probably go a different direction. I was like, that's fine. This isn't the place for me. And so as that severance was starting to run out, I had to make the decision. And I told my wife, whatever, I'll hang TVs. I don't care what it is. I'll hang people's TVs. I'll figure out, what I want to do. But I can't go back to feeling this way. And yeah, and so I started, and 2 weeks in, as the story goes, I get a call from somebody connected to Joe, and
Yes, another story.
yeah, and that launches my career from there. That launches the company, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is history.
Let's talk about Joe Rogan, and we talk about that you built Joe Rogan's studio. That's pretty big, phenomenal work. And how did you get to that gig? I know the guy called, and you didn't have any idea who is Joe. You just show up and says, "I want you to do this."
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story because it was all happenstance. It was August of 2020, beginning of August, and people were probably gonna, well, not now anymore. I was gonna say they probably chastise us for this, but my wife and I were at a distillery at the time, and so we were just, getting some drinks, and my buddy calls me. He's like, "Hey, I want to introduce you to Joe, and he needs a studio." So really, without going into depth, it just turned into this thing where the opportunity presented itself. I had about 2.5 weeks to get it done.
2.5 weeks
2.5
to
weeks
do a studio
to do
for that level.
Yeah, and it wasn't perfect. I mean, when we were talking about this the other day, like it's not anywhere near as elevated as our spaces are now. It was just. I had to have that tunnel vision of like, okay, this is what I have to do. I've got this much time. I've got to compact all that. I've got to do procurement. I've got to pick up all the materials. I've got to, get the space ready for production. I've got to do this, that. And so, yeah, it was a true call to arms because I've always been a very scrappy individual, and my wife is the more methodical one. She loves a very refined plan. She likes it to be structured. And any entrepreneur will tell you that you will fail if you have too much of both, right?
Yep.
You have to have the vision, you have to have the structure, and then you have to somehow marry those two things to work very well. And sometimes it takes more than one person. And I was just one person. And I had the vision and I had the structure as well. It was just the time. And if you don't have all three of those things, something's going to suffer, whether it's quality or your own lifestyle or whatever it is. And so it definitely was my like quality of sleep. I worked like literally from probably about 6:37 a.m. till usually, it reminds me of Soundshed 1.0. It was like usually till about 2 in the morning.
Wow.
And I the fortunate thing is I never had to sleep at the studio to get it done. I would just get up. It was nice to just go sleep in my own bed, but then come back and do it all again. And it was calling anybody I knew to be like, hey, I need your help. I need you to be here. I just need you to do this, that. Just hold this. And it was really that call to arms that brought a lot of people together that made me feel like that same experience of being in a band or building my first studio or working at WeWork, like all those different things. um, everything we did was a culmination of that feeling, that intrinsic feeling I had during those times. And I think that's what kind of kept me moving forward. And I'm the type of individual who I get this very grandiose idea of something and I just go all in. Whether it's Joe, whether it's Rami, whether it's whoever it is,
You're just gonna go and
I,
finish.
I just have to relentlessly do it because it just, I've always believed in that. I've always believed that like your word is your bond and you have to stick with that. And if you don't, then what do
There's a
you,
lot of people they don't
yeah,
believe what you believe. You have seen it during your career. You know, you got screwed
right,
by so many people. I got that, but I always says the man of his word. You know, and then you
right.
finish that, and at the end, it's gonna pay off. But you know how Joe reacted it to 2 weeks that you finished it on time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we finished it on time, and I think that's, he was so appreciative, and I don't think that I could have asked for a better first client, not because of who he was, his status and who he was in the industry. I think it was because he truly appreciated it, even given some of the things that weren't perfect, even given, it was really this whole scrappy operation. He could look at it and say, "Oh wow, like, thank you for getting this done and not making excuses." And I think any client of that caliber is going to feel the same way.
Yeah.
Some clients are going to be a lot more nitpicky about like, "Oh, why isn't it perfect?" But again, he was insightful enough, or he was, he could see that that amount of time was going to be probably impossible for most people. And so that really hit home when he was like, "Yeah, this is great. This is dope. This is really cool." And it definitely helped me appreciate what we had done because for those 2.5 weeks, I hadn't slept. So I was just so in my head about like, "Oh my God, like this isn't perfect. This isn't perfect." Like I needed this to be like exactly what I saw in my head. But somebody who was working with me at the time, who's still working with us now, he just told me like, "Hey, you gotta sit back and appreciate what you've done, or else you're never going to be able to like truly see beyond your frustration of like the process and everything." So it did. It took a little time for me to be like, "Okay, I can breathe again." Um, but that taught me a lot. It taught me how to accept my own deficiencies. It kind of taught me how to accept that I needed help in certain areas and accept the fact that someone is going to be better than me and I need to find those someones to be able to really make this into something else. And so yeah, I mean after I got the tag from Joe on Instagram, it was just it all signs pointed in that direction. And it was also learning how to accept the brutal reality that people are going to hate what you do. Like that's the one thing nobody can prepare you for as an entrepreneur or business owner or a creative is that we want that acceptance. We do it because we enjoy what we do. We enjoy the feeling that it gives us. But I would be hard pressed to say that, people are lying if they're not doing it for other people to experience too. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you can't sit there and say you created something just so you can stare at it every day or so you can enjoy it every day. Most people want people to be a part of that experience. That's why we do it. And when we unveiled that studio, it was great. And it also wasn't. I got people who hated it. I got people who told me that, I should like kill myself because I ruined the podcast. I made it, terrible. And nobody else was affected by this, right? Nobody who helped me put this together, not even Joe, was affected by that turmoil of having to accept the fact that even a small percentage of people who follow him, think about it, 10 million people, 1% of that's 100,000 people. So imagine that is what you get in
And
return.
how did you deal with that? Because I'm so happy you brought that up because you go to this high level client, right off the gate, you get the biggest client and, you're going to execute it under the 2 weeks time pressure. And you have that stress to do the delivery and deal with a lot of unknowns as you go and, unfold. And
Right.
then at the end, when you do the work, and then you get all these negative things that, oh yeah, that's shitty. It doesn't match with the, Joe Rogan's, things. And how did you deal with those negative? Because some entrepreneurs, as you said, they can't deal with that. It will slow them down. They get kind of embarrassed. They get kind of down and everything else. But you still keep on going. And what I see here, you're the king of the podcast, the studio.
Yeah, I mean that's humbling. Thank you for saying that. I didn't take it easy. I definitely didn't.
Thanks for honesty.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy thing to go through. I told my wife, it's like, I don't know if I can do another one of these. I just didn't really care about what was coming my way. All I cared about was my own mental well-being and my own health, and I just knew what I just went through. I didn't know if that was going to be sustainable. I think when businesses talk about sustainability, they talk a lot about the nature of, making sure they've got a good P&L and making sure they have the money coming in, revenue, and making sure that they can continue to be cash flow positive and those things. Sometimes I don't hear them talk about your own self-sustainability, right? There's only so much you can adapt to. There's only so much you can incur. Like, there's only so many things that you can take on before you as a human says, okay, I'm starting to slow down. You can feel yourself slowing down, and you can feel the burnout. You can feel all those things, and it all compounds because of these types of things: the negativity, the outside perception, and I had never experienced that before. I had played in bands and I had done all those things where it's like, okay, great, like this person doesn't like our music, whatever, screw them, like and it's easier because you feel like you have a unified front with your band members or people who do appreciate those things. There was no precedent for this at all. It was, okay, I did this thing. It was the craziest experience I'd ever gone through. Personally, I'm tired. I can't think straight. I don't even know what my company is, what I want to do. And now all of a sudden, I feel this urge to have to defend myself. Like I feel this urge to have to say, hey guys, come on, like that's really mean. And anybody can be a keyboard warrior or a troll or whatever online. It's still very impactful to somebody who's gone through a lot to build themselves up enough to just have the courage to start a business, right? Like it could be anybody, it could be somebody who's got a bakery or somebody who's got an e-com, business or something like that. And in some ways, those are easier because it's easy to say, oh, I don't like this brownie because it tastes weird, because it's so subjective. And I would say, what I'm doing is very subjective as well. It's one of those things where not everybody's going to like a red freaking tube with, weird lighting and things like that. But at the end of the day, I just didn't take into account that Joe loved it. And I had to spend some time like finding myself again and being like, okay, I've got to get off the ground. But for about a week, 2 weeks, I just told my wife, it's like, I just need this time to just not do anything and reflect and decide what I really wanted to do. A friend of mine, Alex Charfin, if you're familiar with him, he's big in the entrepreneur space. Yep. We don't get to speak as much, but as I'd like to, but we used to interact a lot more when we began. And he posts things from time to time where it really is helpful to see his perspective on things, especially the way he helps entrepreneurs grow, because there is a lot to be said about having your mission and having a goal and having a vision and creating the processes and procedures to get there. How do you do that when you start a business from scratch, from the top down? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I struggled for months and months and months or years in the red having to get clients and, oh my God, like, I don't know, like it was the perfect storm of, this is the best client you could start with. Here's the end result.
You asked for the rain, now you got to deal with the mud.
Exactly. So now I'm walking through the mud and I'm like, feeling
That's
like,
tough.
Yeah, it was tough. And it was like, you see the top of this mountain and it's all just mudslide all the way up. And so after the 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks, I was kind of dealing with this, I started getting inquiries and other people were reaching out, and I wasn't prepared for qualifying either. It was one of those things where it was exciting. It was 15 minutes of fame, whatever you want to call it. But I spent a lot of time having to sift through, okay, so who do I work with next? Like who's serious? How do I figure this out? What's my offer? Like I didn't even know
Yeah.
that. I was like, what the hell? Like, do I charge for this type? You know, like, and it was just like having to overcome this laundry list of things to figure out. So when I finally got my mind straight again, I said, okay, can't do this alone. I got to find the right person to work with. I've got this new client coming to me, and I've got to define exactly what the scope is and what I'm trying to do. And so it was a lot to figure out. And you know, luckily, our second client was Alex Hermosi. Huge. I mean, huge in his space. And in the 2.5 years I've known him and we've done the work with him, he's just catapulted to this whole new level of entrepreneur, and his exits and all the things he's done as who he is. I'm just like, wow, it was a great opportunity to work with someone like Alex. And his producer at the time basically solidified what I needed to do by saying, we spent a year trying to find someone like you who can come in, design the space, do all the lighting, the cameras, the acoustics, at a high level like that. And basically we just couldn't find anybody. So that was it. It was like, oh, okay, so I guess I'm going to have to be that person who gives that kind of turnkey experience, but I was still just one person, you know? And I called on somebody met at Joe's through the Joe Project. I called on Drew Teague, who at first I needed him to help me with just fabrication work, you know, like the woodwork and all things like that. And come to find out he does, you know, 3D modeling as well. So I was like, oh, great. I mean, that seems valuable, right? Like I can't do that. I've got it all in my head. It's always in my head. And I was like, that was just the perfect kind of marriage of skill sets. And he just happened to be the really cool guy. And we hit it off, and we started working together. And that client led to another client. And, you know, we worked with Nicholas Bay early. Alex opened up the doors to all the entrepreneurs that I didn't even know existed. You know, there's a lot of things that I learned through them, and how to refine your offer, how to build these processes, how to build your team. And so I kind of had this tunnel vision on the things that I wanted to do, the things I wanted to achieve. But as I started adopting some of these ideas from them, that's where things changed for me. A lot of things changed because then the team became really important to build. So it
wasn't you anymore. It's just you had a team behind you.
Exactly. And that was the most vital turning point in the company, was learning how to buy my time back and knowing what my value was as a leader, and not stagnating the company's growth by being the guy on the ladder, hanging the lights, hanging the acoustic panel, you know, doing those things. So we started bringing in people that I trusted, and not necessarily anybody with the skill set for this, because again, this was all brand new. I don't know that anybody else had existed before us doing this type of work.
I haven't seen anybody.
No. And yeah, there's companies that do AV, right?
Not the whole turnkey.
Right. So it was quite the undertaking to have to figure out a lot of these things that I didn't know before, you know, learning how to be more of a GC, learning how to work with architects, and learning how to work with outside companies to create this kind of experience for the client where it's super seamless. And in the most cases, 90% of the builds we do is really just us. We don't really have an outside architect or MEP or anybody we have to work with. We usually have that in-house. So, you know, we brought in a construction subcontractor who's just phenomenal, and our guys really handle a lot of the tech. And we've actually grown and seen a lot of that change, where we started handling a lot more of the fabrication and build out from the ground up, you know, so framing, drywall, in a lot of cases electrical, low voltage, things like that. And it really helped create this kind of what they call like the one-stop shop for everything. So that was one thing that helped a lot of our clients, was being able to just have that and not have to find a million people who stagnate the process. Because once you start to get more parties involved, it becomes a Zoom meeting every 2 or 3 days, And I think where we do best is just executing and just saying, okay, cool, like let's figure out what the budget is and let's run with it and get it done. And yeah, it's not the perfect process, and we're always refining that process to make sure it's better, more communication with the clients and things like that to make sure there's visibility. But it's definitely helped to kind of keep us moving towards the right goal. And then from there, it's been refining everything you see, the way the lights work, the cameras, the switching, the technology, how easy it is to get your podcast pretty much in and out and not necessarily have to have a producer or you'll still need an editor and things like that. So from there, refining the offer based on what the clients are saying their pain points are, even after they have a beautiful studio. And so, that's when we started bringing in editing, in-house editing. That's why we built this space, because not everybody was ready to take that full investment and go all in on a, six-figure studio or what have you. So yeah, that's pretty much the journey from A to B.
Basically, a lot of your work are custom solutions.
Yes.
Like you go and kind of do assessment what they need and how they're gonna do it, or what are their goals and vision, and you put a plan together, and then you give them a turnkey as far as video, camera, audio, lighting, the whole build out and everything else. That's pretty phenomenal, because I haven't seen anybody in US that actually goes there and does that. Is this gonna open a lot of door for you? I'm sure.
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's been pretty much the main revenue driver for this
We're going
company.
audio, video, as you see everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Everybody's got to have a podcast.
right. And so the client has to decide, is it more advantageous to have a whole team, or in the whole case of COVID, everybody kind of shifted to work from home and also to create from home. So of course, there's consumer products out there all day long that you can buy, a Best Buy or Amazon or Guitar Center, whatever it is, not just for your podcast, but for production, for masterminds. A lot of people were doing like online mastermind courses and things like that, where they're addressing hundreds of people, and they have a subscription and people are tuning in, and they're really getting a lot of value from being able to talk to that one person that they look up to as an entrepreneur. And so everybody needed some way to create content. I think the ones that really took the time to create a brand through video are the ones that have succeeded the most, because they got in at a critical mass where everybody was trying to do content at the same time, but they decided, okay, we're going to tie in our brand to what people see on camera. So whoever you see, whether it's Alex or Gary Vee or any of these huge entrepreneurs, exactly, their aesthetic, what they look like, what's behind them, when someone's on their show, it's like, oh, they're on their show. And so that was really vital for us too, is to create a brand for each one of our clients based on who they are, like their colors, their general branding, their cues that
That's
they
so
like.
important. The brand voice, and the brand voice is very important. That how you're gonna put all that together, and
Right.
everything is at the same time you keep the consistency. That will the people go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, it it just elevates the sense of this person knows what they're doing, right? This person, you're spending a lot of money with this individual, and some people would say that I'm wrong about this, and that's completely fine. It's all perspective and perception. But for me, I know that I liken it to being in a band, right? And this is why I always go back to this, because I have so much experience doing that. When you spend so much time creating a product and you don't market it the right way, then who's your audience? Like who's actually gonna buy that product? Who's
You're
actually
absolutely right.
gonna go all in on what you're trying to build and scale? And so as a musician, if you're in a band and you're just playing and playing and playing, and you think, okay, well, if we keep playing the same venue over and over and over again, people are just they're gonna hear us and they're gonna love us. They're gonna show up. We're gonna keep asking our friends and family to promote us. And there's a finite amount of return you get from that, you know? And that was one thing I always struggled with in music, was getting full buy-in from people and saying, look, we can write the best songs that we think are great all day long. But until we create an identity, until we create a brand, until we market it the right way, you see artists and bands that people hate, but they're making money and they're doing very well because they have the right PR behind them. They have the right marketing team. They have the right, way to package that thing. And so it's the same thing with general content. It's the same thing with your mastermind or your product videography or who you are as a brand. One client that we were fortunate to work with that did it really well was Nick Bear of the Bear Performance podcast, and he owns Bear Nutrition. And they are just on top of it. They are just putting out content constantly. He has a team following him around during his runs, during their events, during new supplements they release, during, guests that they have on the podcast. You can see that the exponential input output becomes tied together. It all correlates based on how much effort they're putting in towards that. And in the 2 years since we've worked with Nick, I'm blown away because I see it everywhere. I see him everywhere. He's interviewing some of the biggest people in the industry, and they're happy to be a part of it because they can see that he's taken the time to create that brand. And they're only benefiting from that, right? Because his audience is so large.
Yes.
Even if they have a large audience, it's that cross-pollination of saying, okay, you're in the fitness, nutrition area, but you also tie into entrepreneurship because you built this huge company, from the ground up. And this entrepreneur who may be in real estate or who may be in e-com or anything like that, like there's always going to be that parallel. And so when you have that brand and you take something like this seriously, people then start to take you seriously in return. And then, it's easier to be able to leverage,
Basically building that ecosystem, as you say.
Exactly. And again, Joe did it way in the beginning when people could just be in front of a webcam and people could talk and be in a dark room and that's great, right? If you were an early adopter and you're doing it well and that's what worked and you already have the audience.
Gary, we did it very early too.
Yeah. But if you're somebody who has the means to make an investment and build it, and it doesn't mean like, hey, call Soundshed and let's go all in and spend all this money. No, it just means just like you would hire the right people for HR, or the right people you would hire for anything else in your company.
Do it right.
Do it right, right? Bring in the right people who are going to help you get your content to that place where, and listen to them. Here is one thing I will say drives me freaking bonkers is I have worked with some of the best entrepreneurs and high visibility, high wealth entrepreneurs where sometimes they will hire a content team and their content team will vent to me because they refuse to listen to that team.
Why they hire them in the first place?
That's the $1 million question. That could be the $1 billion question.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. Because I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And that's the crazy thing is that like I don't sit here and say I'm the best. I just found a great niche. I leveraged my knowledge and I built a great team and I happen to know a lot about a bunch of different things and created something out about that. But the creatives behind the camera, the people who are doing the editing, the people who are doing the coloring and the audio and all that stuff, they are so valuable when you hire them, right? Because at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is not going to know those things. They're not going to know about color science or bit rates or audio fidelity or lighting or anything like that. They don't know. That's why you hired a team. So I implore you to like listen to your team, right? Like that's the most valuable thing you can do. And it becomes this what you would say like not really an ecosystem, but becomes part of the process of leveraging the brand and making money. Because I've seen so many productions where the white balance is off or the audio is terrible or the framing's weird and things like that. And it's just a matter of taking a little time, listening to your team, saying, hey, we've got these little technical things. A lot of people just say, well, fix it in post, zoom in post. And it's like, okay, but if we just do it right now, it'll save your team hours and hours and hours of editing. And also, it's just going to build a better rapport. It's going to build, and then that's going to yield a better result for your marketing or for your product or your branding, whatever you're doing. And And I think that's one thing I've seen time and time again is they think that I'm the magic bullet to fix all these other problems that they may have with their infrastructure and their processes that's related to content. And it's like, well, yes and no. I can give you a better platform that works better, that works more seamlessly, especially for your editing team or your producer. But at the end of the day, they are still your team. And if there's challenges and pitfalls and struggles that you guys are having, I can't fix that, you know?
Yeah, the
And
internal.
yeah, so those internal things are very, very paramount to address and leverage the right way before even making a huge
Yeah,
investment.
this is, most of that, as you said, I'm so happy you mentioned that because I have seen people, like as you said, these entrepreneurs that they say, I know it all, which is a wrong statement because at one point you need other people's help.
Right,
I don't know everything. In my team, I always ask my people that, I don't know this. Can you help me out or what you guys would think? And I'm totally agree with you. As soon as you bring the people into your ecosystem or your circle and get their feedback, everything is going to change. Everything's going to change.
right,
But if you are a tunnel vision and say, hey, this is the way I want to do it, and you don't understand, this is the brand that I want, that's not going to work because you're not going to get there without them. Because
right,
we all, we are nobody without our team. You know it, I know it. Otherwise, you can't do everything here that I see right now today by yourself. It's impossible. I can't do everything by myself. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that they don't realize the power of a team
hmm
that they're gonna work. If you are a founder, you're not going the financial, go get somebody as a co-founder that knows the
right,
numbers.
right,
Or if I am creating something that I need some like operation, I go get the operation. It doesn't mean that you have to do it everything by yourself. That's what the rate of failure is so high in entrepreneurs, I think because of their mindset.
yeah, absolutely, and that's spot on. In terms of constantly learning and ingesting new information and being open and available to be almost vulnerable, right? We have to be vulnerable to accept that if we have deficiencies, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Once we address those things, we bring in the help that we need to supplement that, and if we can't do that, again, we're our own worst enemy, trying to fight against the current and constantly being like, okay, I'm going to take this extra thing on because I think I can do it better, or I'm going to do this because I think I can do it better, or it's not going to get done unless I do it myself. And it's good to know how your company operates, right? It's good to see everything from the bottom up first. Like if you can see what everybody in our case, right? I started off as an installer, a technician, like working in attics and digging trenches in the dirt for speaker cable and things like that. I've worked on you know back in like Active Directory and like learning how to set up like email repositories and all that stuff for IT and cloning machines and having
Wow.
like and so it all kind of comes into play in the grand scheme of like how this company operates and why we do what we do and how we do things well. But there's no way we could survive as a company if I didn't spend more and more time learning how to structure this as a true business, learning how to be a true entrepreneur. And even then, I would say that's probably my weakest part. Like that's where I'm constantly
And you
having.
admit to that. And
Yeah,
yeah, and as you said, you're vulnerable.
yeah,
And you say
absolutely.
that because we talk about that, one of the things that entrepreneurs or people in general, and most of the leaders, they don't understand is the vulnerability. Because I can tell you, I talked to most of them and they said, oh, I don't want to be vulnerable. That shows that I'm weak.
Yeah,
But vulnerability is not the sign of weakness. That doesn't
right,
mean that you are weak. Yes, some people, they might take advantage of your vulnerability, use it against you. So what? But if you're vulnerable and you admit, as you said, to the stuff that you don't know, I swear to God, you gotta go faster and faster.
right.
This is what I personally experience.
Yeah, and that's personal growth lies in failure. It
I
lies
love that.
in being able to pick yourself up and say, okay, it's gonna hurt. And in a lot of cases, it's gonna hurt people around you. When you're somebody who fails, you tend to project that on other people. You tend to project it on your partner at home. You tend to project it on family and the people who do believe in you. And it's easy to put those blinders on and say, oh, this is all about me. But at the end of the day, we are the sum of our experiences. We are the sum of every part that comes to us and says, hey, you could be doing this better, or you're doing this amazing. And you have to find that common ground between listening to what you know is best for yourself, and then you have to listen to what's best for everybody involved too. And I think that's where I've seen some people fail, where they get into this fight or flight mode where it's about self-preservation, right? It's about, how do I preserve what I'm used to and what I'm comfortable with this company? So you see things like these layoffs happening and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we have our own challenges as a company,
Yep,
and it's hard because
we all have.
you hit those slow times and you feel so accountable. You feel so guilty because the people that trust you, the people who are there with you, like, you care about them. You genuinely do. And if you don't, then you shouldn't be running a business. Like, you should not be involving anybody else if you don't care about your team, you don't care about those individuals. But as a leader, you always have to consider that there's a time to be vulnerable, and there's a time to say, okay, I've got to shut up. I've got to go out and do what I need to do to make things
To
work.
make things work.
And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're impatient and we want to see it happen overnight. And you make decisions that you're like, okay, you want it to be the best decision for everybody, but sometimes you have to look at it as, okay, well, what's best for the company as well. And that's the hardest thing. I think that's one of the hardest things is the accountability and accepting that and being like, hey, sorry guys, like, we can do this together. And you told me your story, and I think
Yeah.
it was phenomenal to hear about how much buy-in you had with your team and how they felt so compelled to be there even in a time that was so tumultuous. Like, you couldn't do anything.
I know I can, and always tell people that I am nobody without my team, without my people. I'm really nobody. If if I get famous, if I do that, it's all because of them. The
Right,
guys and the gals that they work so hard behind the scene, that you have to give the credit what the credit goes.
right.
And most of the leaders, they don't understand that. It's just, oh, because they look at the people as a number.
Hmm.
Okay, this is a number. I'm going to change this number with that. But in reality, that doesn't work like that. You experience it, I experience it. But where you see in the next 5 years, where Matthew is going with all this creative idea, with this crazy idea, that I can really see you guys, you like killing it. Like, the amount of precision, the professionalism, and the beauty and everything goes to this work that you guys do is phenomenon. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years? Oh man,
And
I
where do you
don't know.
want to be?
What do I want to be? I think for me, what I'd really like to see from the growth of this is, I would love to replicate this. I would love to be able to offer a space like this, start with Texas and build more spaces that people can come in and scale, and also just find more opportunities as a company to kind of push the limits of what this kind of industry has become. We already saw ourselves being this trendsetter in this, like, look at these cool spaces that we build and look at these cool people that we work with. But I think that, to your point earlier, the content's not going anywhere. And there's going to be this paradigm shift where you see technology. We've already seen it. Technology is catching
Yes.
up, right? So there's not always going to be this need for, like, these beautiful, like, intricate broadcast studios. We've literally taken, let's call it a television studio, right, that would cost typically millions of dollars. You see ESPN or NBC and all that stuff, and we've given that to the general user, right, the
I
general
can see
public.
it. Yeah.
And we started off building it for people who had the means to do it at a much smaller scale than these big broadcast facilities. But I think as technology catches up, there's going to be more and more products out there that can kind of give you that experience, whether it's digital or whether it's something that people can do in post to create a space like this. You know, you see Unreal Engine where they can take, you know, these big digital
Yeah.
walls and green and chroma green and like do all this crazy stuff with it. And I think that eventually it's going to be so accessible that, you know, a company like us and great, you know, technology will phase us out at some point. So we have to adapt. So that adaptability comes in the form of like creating spaces that are more experiential like this, where we can have a great conversation, making that more accessible across, you know, Texas, maybe the US, but also, you know, kind of putting our name on a lot of things. You know, I'd love to have our creative team and our post editing team and content creation or curation team grow even more. And then also, you know, whatever comes our way, I think we've had a lot of fun. You know, we built a gym for Joe. We built a gym for John Allen, who goes by Mr. Ballin on YouTube. And so people are noticing that we do the
Creative
studios,
work.
but just like we also do this creative, like let's just create a space, and that's never going anywhere. You know, people will always want their own customized man cave or she shed or whatever the heck, you know, they want for their experience. And in 5 years, I would just hope that we're keeping up with those trends and also creating the new trends, and then also creating other avenues of our business where people want to get involved and be like, hey, you know, like I'm a creative, I don't really know how to start, and we can offer that to them. Be like, well, cool, well, come, we'll adopt this and we'll help you get to that place, and you know, then from there you could be the next Joe or, you know, whoever. And yeah, so in 5 years, I think there's a lot of things that could happen between
It's
now
a
and
lot,
then.
yeah. But
Um,
you know, I can tell you that, you know, the sky unlimited,
yeah,
is you can guys do so many things, but so far what I have seen is amazing. And then if somebody needs your help, what is the process? They have to reach out to you and discuss the concept. You do assessment. Walk me through that. If somebody like watching this, listening, say, I need Matthew's team's help, where should I start?
yeah. So it's pretty simple. We've been a truly organic growth company since day one, and a lot of it, I would say most of our clients are going to either come through referral based, or they can look at our work on Instagram, the website soundshedAV.com. They can submit a form. And what the process typically looks like is it's very, very one to one and kind of custom to you. So it's not like you're working with some sales rep or some systems engineer or anything like that. You literally talk to me. So it doesn't, I don't care who it is, you know, you can text me, you can call me. We kind of go through that process of figuring out, is this something that you really want to do? Is this something you're really ready, prepared to invest in? And how can we best serve that? And then once we decide, like, you know, we've told clients who don't know if they want a podcast, and this is what this space is for. It's like, well, maybe just come use our space. You know, like some people are a
Yeah.
little bit averse to making a huge investment like this. But if they do, if and when they do say, hey, we're ready to do this, that process is pretty simple. They engage us. We walk through what the use case is. That gives me a good idea of how the technology should work. And then we engage design and go through the 3D rendering and get ideas from them, from their branding, and then just kind of what they like, you know, like everybody's different. Not everybody can articulate that and convey that in a way that's makes sense to, you know, a design engineer. So we do our best to kind of be as malleable as possible to be able to kind of like stretch the limits of what they want. But also, it's always been really cool because a lot of clients will just say, hey, do something that looks dope, and we'll just in the moment give them some ideas, and they'll be like, yeah, that sounds good, and we'll throw together a rendering, and they're like, this is perfect, let's go with it. And some clients want to spend months and months and months designing, and we'll go back and forth and do different renderings. And it's really just, again, it's custom to you and it's custom to whoever wants to be a part of the
Do
process.
you have any advice for these young entrepreneurs that are out there? They have the ideas, they got a creative idea, whatever it is. They really have that things stuck in them and say, I want to go do it, I want to go do it, but they have fears, they have, this unknown stuff that is going on. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice for them? Because you've been there, you went through that. Any advice for them that they can use?
This will probably be counterintuitive to most people, but my advice would be prepared to fail, and don't be afraid of that, because you will fail and you will fall on your face and it will be hard. It'll be times where you can't sleep or eat, or you question yourself every single day, be prepared to build that mental fortitude first and foremost. Once you get past that, once you get past the fact that you're only human, then you'll start to see the results in the efforts you put in. So if you can do that and you can say, "Hey, I'm not going to be perfect and I'm going to learn this as I go," be open to either finding a mentor or finding the information yourself and try different things. Don't get too hung up on the process at first, because if you don't dive in and do it, one, you're not going to fail, so you can't grow, and two, you're going to spend way too much time talking about what you want to do rather than executing and figuring out that what you wanted to do may not have been the right thing to begin with. So until you do it and you accept that you're going to fail, then it's all still going to be just a dream.
It's just keep going and don't
Keep
stop.
going. Yeah.
Don't stop. And I totally agree with you. You might fail. You will fail. And you're going to fail miserably. But, you're going to get up, dust yourself, as you said. Just keep going, because it's a journey. It's
It
not
is.
a destination. It really is a fantastic journey, but it's not for everybody. It's going to be lonely. It's scary. You got a good days, you got a bad days,
Yep.
but at the end, you got to love what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my thing. You gotta love what you do. But I see a lot of progress for you, my friend, and a lot of good days are coming toward you, because, as I said again, I'm gonna brag about this all day to my friends, and
Thanks.
I probably be one of your clients very soon for Talk to Rami show. But this is amazing. What you have done is amazing. You should proud of yourself what you have done, and
Thank
because
you.
we proud of you as
Thanks,
a
Rami.
people that is the same town and city, and I got to know you as a friend, and I'm really proud of you, what you have done, man. You should be proud, and you have a lot of stuff, and you're gonna be up there, no doubt, man. But thank you so much. I really appreciate for your time,
Yeah, I appreciate you.
and
Thank you.
we're gonna catch up soon again.
Let's do it.